Good evening and welcome to B-Sides Las Vegas Common Ground. This talk will be self-introduced by a panel that needs no introduction, but they'll handle it. In the meantime, we'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our Inner Circle sponsors, Critical Stack and Valamail, and our stellar sponsors, Microsoft, Robinhood, and Secure Code Warrior. And without further ado, I will mention these talks are being streamed live, so as a courtesy, please turn off your cell phones or silence them. And later on, or during the talk, are we going to allow questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to do something a little different today. We are going to give you a...
It's experimental theater.
Perfect. And I'm going to get interrupted nonstop.
Correct.
Constantly. It's going to be like a news discussion show. I'm your very serious anchor and host, Jen Ellis. I just want to be explicit up front. We may say things that we don't personally really believe. Shocking, I know. Imagine that on TV. So don't hold anybody accountable to what you hear. And also some things may just be
completely incorrect. Flat out lies.
Yeah, totally made up. He jumped in because he was worried I was going to swear then. The other thing is we totally want audience participation. We want to hear your opinions, your questions, get involved. You are our live studio audience for the recording of this particular news show. Or perhaps you'd like to be a caller. We could have callers, whichever you prefer. If you want to speak up at any point, actually the size of this room, you can probably just shout, but I don't think that's good for the recording, so microphone. So put your hand up and we'll make movie magic. Yep. It'll be fantastic. All right, so here we go.
Smart Sound. Smart Sound. Smart Sound.
Okay, welcome to our show. Thanks for being our live studio audience. This is a very special episode of our show. Tonight we're focusing on news headlines, the hardest hitting headlines on vulnerability disclosure, all the news you wanted to have. We are joined by a regular featured guest, Leonard Bailey of the Department of Justice. He really is from the Department of Justice, so he really is a stodgy government
That
lawyer.
part's not a lie.
And we have two first-time guests. We have Mr. Todd Beardsley, security researcher extraordinaire.
Thank you.
And Mr. Colin Morgan, who represents the voice of the manufacturer.
Pleasure to be here, Jen. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being our corporate show. Just before we jump into our show and our main news stories, we're just going to have a quick word from our sponsor, Blockchain Helper. Don't forget, blockchain, it's security software, it's a body spray, it's breath freshener, and it's a fire retardant. There really is nothing that blockchain can't do. It's available now in Blu-ray, DVD, Airspray, and my favorite, suppository. So what's our first news story for the week? So this seems to be, guys, a story about a researcher that disclosed and asked for a bug bounty.
Laudable effort, by the way, from this research.
Is that the disclosure or the bug bounty fees? Fake news?
No, the disclosure.
Bug bounties, yeah.
For sure. I mean, when
Trying to
hackers
make
find
money.
things, they should
They're
say
just trying to
things,
make money.
right?
Come on. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm hearing two very different points of view here. So as far as I can tell, shockingly, as far as I can tell, you believe that this researcher is motivated by a desire to do good in the world. Is that right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Now, I mean,
Because
I'm
all
not expecting
researchers do good, right? They
pretty
don't want
much,
money.
yeah. So when
Out of their good of their heart.
and they work hard, and so for sure they should get paid. But like ultimately, their goal is laudable, it's noble, it's a virtuous act.
Does the requesting of a bug bounty in any way diminish that?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
So tell us more about this. You sound like you've had some bad experiences with researchers.
Well, I mean, researchers, some of them are good, but most of them are there just for money. They're extortionists.
Okay, well,
they just want to get paid,
Oh,
whether or
extortion.
not they actually
100%
have a
untrue.
Extortion is a strong word.
vulnerability.
Perhaps we should turn to our.
But maybe we should keep moving on and just learn more about how nefarious this research is.
Okay, so let's take a quick look at the story. Although Leonard, would you like to jump
I
in?
would like to say one thing about bug bounties. So the Department of Justice is in support of vulnerability disclosure policies. We've been so since 2017 explicitly. We also support bug bounty programs. They make it clear what authorization an individual has in interacting with a network, which tends to remove any possibility of a CFAA issue. The one thing that concerns us a little bit is the advent of bug bounty programs may have altered a bit the perception of some researchers that they're entitled to a payment. for
Entitled,
funding.
that is a very, very important word.
Now,
Very important.
You can debate whether that should be or not, but the issue
And
of-
we will.
Right, and we will.
That's what we're here for. Yes. absolutely.
But the issue of whether one is entitled to payment
You heard the word entitled again there, right?
can spill into the question
Researcher
of whether
entitled.
one is threatening in a way that's extortionate to extract payment from a company. And so we'll talk about the language and the care that maybe researchers need to exercise around the issue of how they discuss payment with a company they find a vulnerability.
And we'll quickly learn how, in this exact example, somebody is doing everything he just said, but from the wrong, that they're trying to extort money out of the company.
So perhaps we should, as you suggested, just learn a little bit more about the story and
We
kind of
don't.
get
I
into
mean, we
details.
can, but we already know.
Yeah.
We already know.
So it appears that the researcher discovered a bug
Good for them.
in video conferencing software made by Zip. One thing I'm interested in, Zip is obviously it's not one of the bigger companies. It's a mid-sized company, maybe
Sure.
even a startup. Does that mean that we have a different level of expectation on what their security is going to be? Is it fair to expect a mid-sized company to have a bug bounty, Colin?
Well, I mean, mid-sized companies are very agile and lean, and they can operate pretty quickly. So we'd expect never to see vulnerabilities from them. They're perfect. They can patch things as quickly as they want. They have great practices and processes.
So does that make Zip a particularly bad company that it has a vulnerability then?
Who said it has a vulnerability?
I believe that.
I think the
This is all
researcher is
hearsay.
saying they have a
The
vulnerability.
researcher
So
said
here's two things, right? Like, so mid-size tells me amateur hour, right? Like, unless you're Google, you don't know what you're doing when it comes to
Right, because
vulnerability.
all the actual hacks out
But-
there don't happen to big companies.
Right. So, but what I believe is happening here is that I will simultaneously argue that they have no idea what they're doing, and they should also know better.
Right, the researchers, exactly. They don't know what they're doing.
the
They're
company-
coming
the
up with
company
fake
should know better.
vulnerabilities and trying to scare people. I mean,
Zip.
Zip is
I mean,
fantastic. I know Zip. I use Zip. They're fantastic. Never had an
They're
issue.
all right.
They care about my privacy. They're perfect.
So you still feel confident in using their
Absolutely,
product?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, from our experience, we have seen companies on the small side of this. We've had an incident with researchers and a company that had maybe a few hundred employee customers. We've also had an incident with a company owned by one of the largest companies in the country. I think there are 3 conferences in Las Vegas right now premised on the notion that companies of all sizes have problems with vulnerability.
Yeah,
sure.
unfortunately, all the good
if you write
security experts
software,
were
you
there.
ship bugs. Like, full stop.
These hackers think they know everything. Come on.
Okay, so perhaps if we took a look
They live
at
in
the
their
email,
parents'
that
basements.
might help. If we look at the
They
email
drink Jolt Cola.
that our researcher sent out. So,
They like to eat potato
1989.
chips.
so our
I mean,
researcher
this researcher.
goes by the name Bytelord.
Exactly.
Right.
Are you
Bytelord.
familiar with Mr. Bytelord?
Mr. Lord,
Wait. Do you mean?
Oh, Mr. Lord, I apologize. Wait,
Wait,
did
but
he?
who's Tim? 'Cause,
Did
you know-
Mr. Lord? Did he keynote a conference recently?
I think
Is it? Is this
keynoted
Bytelord
yesterday.
Tim?
Oh,
he's
Tim,
just Tim.
Tim,
Oh.
okay.
And how
So-
much do you think this I worth in a? Oh, he's clearly. So this is a prime example of a researcher who is outside the country, and we definitely need to go and find him and arrest him.
I'm sorry. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, because the last sentence is grammatically incorrect, and we take all this training.
It's what now? Could that not just be a typo?
No. Come on. We take all of this training about not to click on
No,
links in
I have.
email, and they all look exactly like this. This is a phishing expedition.
So Leonard,
Get your fishing rods out, because that's what they're doing.
Is this the kind of email that the Department of Justice would want to investigate?
Absolutely.
So if there's one thing I would say to researchers is one of our challenges is trying to figure out who's a good guy, who's a researcher acting in good faith.
The big
and who's-
companies
Anyone
are
who
good
reports
guys.
vulnerabilities.
And who's actually engaged in
Middle-sized
malicious
companies are
activity.
good guys.
And the way we're going to do that
Small
is by
companies are good
looking
guys.
at all the conduct and trying to discern from that whether this is someone who is engaged in one activity or another. So there's no one thing in this email that's dispositive that says, I am threatening you. And that's one thing that may be lacking in this particular email in terms of it being actionable. A clear, explicit threat of destruction to a computer, to
That's because he's on a boat
evidence,
searching for some swordfish.
or to basically break into a network again based on the information they had, which would all be illegal under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's extortion provision 1030A7.
Okay, so thank you for helping me explain that. It's nice to get like a sober point of view on this panel. Okay, so perhaps if we learn a little bit more about who our researcher is, Mr. Bytelord. So he's a part-time pen tester. Is that a common thing? Is part-time pen tester, Todd? Is that a normal?
Part-time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's an enormous, there's a preponderance, I'd say, of
Imposters.
Researchers who
Imposters
do
that
it
wanna work
on
part-time.
their own time. They have a love of it. They are puzzle solvers. They're very much into, the intellectual challenge of it. And I would say that a part-time pen tester is absolutely, that sounds legit to me. Like someone who's working IT who also likes to, take things apart.
So as media, we often hear, quite a sort of stereotype about what a hacker looks like, or how they behave, perhaps where they live in their parents' basement. Do these stereotypes sort of seem fair? Do they
No.
do they resonate with you?
Yeah, but what you got
There are
to
hackers
you got to
of
name
all
you got to name
types.
like Bytelord. I mean, and you're part-time. I mean, come on, commit to something already. If you want to be a pen tester, commit to it. Why are you going part-time here?
Well, and the use of an alias and use of Bitcoin is all for
all nefarious activity.
Researchers' protection.
Buying illicit
right?
materials
I think for
on
our
Silk
audience's
Road
benefit,
12 on the dark web.
Perhaps just one opinion at a time. So, Todd, you're saying that Bitcoin is a very reasonable, common practice on the internet.
Oh, for sure.
But it sounds as if you're saying that perhaps this funds crime.
Oh, absolutely.
How
Bitcoin
does
is only
the Department
for
of Justice view Bitcoin?
So we've said that we think of Bitcoin as a legitimate form of currency. That said, as I said, we look at the totality of circumstances. Is someone acting like a good guy or a bad guy? There's nothing illegal about use of Bitcoin, but to the extent that someone is going to measures to conceal their identity, it might be one factor that we'd weigh. If there were a researcher who came in full bore and said, I am real identity, it demonstrates they have nothing to hide. Again, I'm not saying that there is anything unlawful about doing this in an anonymous way, but it is, it may play into a larger narrative of whether you are acting in a way that's actually threatening and perhaps illegal.
Look, at the end of the day, Mr. Tim here, aka Bytelord, aka Mr. Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, he's fake. He doesn't give you any information, gives you no details whatsoever, says pay me in Bitcoin when pay you for what? Something you said you found, but you won't tell me what it is.
I will agree
and you
with you on
mask
that.
your
Like, he
name
needs to
and you
provide
shield
some
who you
kind of
are.
proof of
You
concept.
you make sentences incorrectly, grammatically incorrect.
So Todd, as a very seasoned researcher,
Thanks.
how could Mr. Bytelord have gone about this differently?
I don't know. Like, it could have probably been a little more diplomatic on the whole asking to get paid part. Like, if he's looking for, a bug bounty, like, I don't know. It feels, don't get me wrong, like, Zip should absolutely, for the kind of company they are today, Zip should absolutely already have some kind of vulnerability handling, some kind of bug bounty going on. That said, I would have preferred, if it were me, right, like, I would provide some kind of proof ahead of time, right? Like,
Right.
I want to be able to show some kind of like proof of exploit, proof of the vulnerability, like some notion of like how, like some criticality of it, right? Like,
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong. all of us hackers hate CVSS. We all have plenty of things to say about it. But CVSS, of course, is a scoring system used to rate criticality.
Thank you for explaining that to our mainstream audience. I
Yes,
appreciate
to
that.
our mainstream television audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it would have been nice to see a little more detail in the initial in the initial contact.
Well, I have to say, Todd and I are in total agreement here that this researcher was outside their bounds. They shouldn't be messing with things that aren't theirs. They don't
Well,
have full
I don't
information,
think
so
that's
they're
what I
not
said.
sharing it, and they want money for something that they didn't even do. So I'm in total agreement with you, Todd. Thank you for clarifying my points.
Could I jump in? There's one thing that I
Please.
think Tim did, I think, correctly, and this is something that we have advised researchers to do. To the extent that they have this sort of contact with a company and are suggesting there's a vulnerability they want to get paid for, it is very helpful to have that transaction in some form of writing. I say this because we have reviewed instances where there's been a report to us of an extortionate threat, and an extortionate threat is really defined by the sort of language and interaction. It doesn't have to be express. Many people have run into someone who said, "Nice car. Be ashamed if something happened to it." And that may be enough based on the surrounding circumstances. But what we're going to do as prosecutors and investigators is look at the evidence and try to determine, does it meet the elements of a statute? And so we haven't had instances where there's a difference of opinion about what happened, how it was said, what the exact words were. And so to the extent that we're going to have to look at that, a researcher is doing him or herself some service by making sure those words are preserved in some sense.
Okay, great. So where do we think that this story is going to go?
Somebody's going to end up in jail.
I hope he gets paid.
Did you say you don't think it's going to be you?
I hope he gets paid.
Oh,
Yeah.
you hope he gets paid.
Yeah.
And what? Just out of interest, Todd, what would be a reasonable amount to get paid out on something like this?
I mean, it
common?
depends. It depends a ton on the bug, right? Like, did we get the details of the bug? It's like he could like.
No, he didn't share anything.
Did he,
just
make
said,
any
"Give me-" he
claim?
just said, "Give me
Yeah, I
money."
think he makes a claim where he
mean-
could like open your video camera and mic without you knowing. So that's a pretty big deal, right? Like that's.
Okay.
And for
It sounds bad.
For the kind of customers that Zip has, that sounds like something spooky. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what. This is the thing. Like, bug bounties are still new enough where we don't. Like, I don't think there is a normalized set of tiers
Yeah.
for this kind of bug.
And on this, I think this is one of those areas where the novelty of
Yeah.
bug bounties and pricing is an interesting X factor. So in other areas where we think about extortion, one of the elements we may look at is whether you're asking.
Whoa, who's talking about extortion?
Exactly, extortion. Cease and
I'm
desist.
not
That's the
saying in
first
this
step.
case.
Cease and desist. Let's-
When we look at
get 'em.
extortion, is whether you've asked for something,
I'm going to quote you on that.
an unreasonable
I got my PR
amount
firm. Yeah.
of compensation for the thing that you've done. And so, that's easy in some contexts. If someone says, essentially, I'll watch your car for $500 in this parking space, you have some notion that there's something going on there in that transaction. This may be a little bit harder here, where you've got maybe not a clear rating structure on exactly how much a bug is going to be worth. But whether an exorbitant amount is asked may be part of our analysis.
Yeah, and from my side, as the Department of Justice clearly just stated, this is an example of extortion. And so
think
we're going to
that's
have
what
a
they said.
criminal and a civil angle to this one.
I don't think that's what they said. I think
Should we
if we
re-
went
should
to
we
play
record
back,
the-
I
Yeah,
think it would be much less.
I agree with him. So,
inflammatory statement. Okay, so do we?
so
have
we're going to
any-
sue him on one angle, and we're going to try to put him in jail.
Do we have any questions or calls or comments from our live studio audience? Anyone on the phone? No. Oh yeah. Okay, we do. Excellent. Fantastic. The audience is still awake. How can our experts help you or themselves?
Would it make any difference if the researcher had presented their request in the form of a contract or with legal representation saying, I have X information, what would it be worth to you to disclose some defect in your product?
Oh, that's way worse. I mean, that's just so you're gonna go find things and expect a consulting agreement. No, you're gonna find something. You're gonna get a lawsuit on your. You know what?
And then how would the Department of Justice view that? Would they?
Well, as I said, the issue of whether you're looking like a legitimate researcher or someone who is looking to extort someone, I think this sort of kind of normalized arrangement, a business arrangement, would seem to suggest a more business type arrangement rather than something that's criminal. Again, not dispositive. People could still, in the context of this, do something that's extortion. But it's, again, something that would have to be considered.
How would you feel if someone walked up to your car and smashed it with a hammer and said, hey, guess what? There's a hole in your car and here's a contract for me to fix it? Isn't that the same thing?
He didn't write the bug. Like, Zip wrote the bug. Don't get me, like, it's not like he walked up to Zip and, like, inserted a bug and said, like, hey, let me tell you about this.
Well, how
bug.
do we know? He doesn't ever says anything about the details. He says, I can turn the camera on. I can turn my laptop on. My camera turns on. I mean, maybe he's talking about that.
Perhaps we should leave this story here and move on to our next news story. Okay, so in our next story, some nice animation right there.
Swipes.
Our next story is around. So we have a very large, very very household name.
Oh, yeah, they
vendor
always blow it out of proportion.
Who is saying
Wow.
that the researcher here is totally blowing it out of proportion. It's not a real risk. Let's learn a little bit more about this.
Jen, I'm sorry. I really got to jump in here. I mean,
I see you
how
have an
many?
Ajax
How?
on your table in front of you, so this might be perhaps a little personal.
No. Look, Ajax is amazing. They're an unbelievable company. They make the best phones on the planet. They protect my privacy better than anyone. And I tell you, these researchers are out to get these companies. They care about their name. They care about making money, the notoriety around it. And so they're going to blow it out of proportions as best they can. Many of them, in fact, all of them, are best friends with the media. All of them.
That's
So when they find a bug,
100%
they pick
untrue.
up the phone and they call their friend.
Hackers don't have
And they
PR
say,
firms.
"Guess what I found? Can you put it on the front
They don't
page?
have media
Put it on the front. I'm going to go present it. I'm going to go present it at DEF CON 2 days from now and not tell anybody about it." They blow everything out of proportion.
So,
Everything.
Todd, I think I heard you saying that hackers don't have PR firms. Todd, does your company have a PR firm?
I'd rather not talk about that.
So perhaps we should take a little look at the story in more detail. Look at who the researcher is. Does this help us understand a little bit more about this story?
She's biased. She has a bad history with them, which means she probably doesn't like their products.
I did.
And is
I
going
don't-
after them. So,
What you take out of this, I mean, Ajax historically has
amazing.
not been friendly to independent research, have not been friendly to independent bug reports. And so, I mean, I do think that Jana's kind of bent over backwards here. I mean, first off, she's using her real name. Everybody knows who she is. She's like, super hacker extraordinaire,
So
whatever.
Jan, we don't think Jan's a hacker handle. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm not very familiar with the language of the.
No, but clearly Jan is
But-
not collaborative. I mean, it's been 5 months.
It's been
she
5
has
months.
not given
She
all the
has
details she
been
needs.
so
I mean,
patient.
how long is the manufacturer of the phone here supposed to give her to share that information before they have to move on? Just give the information up front.
So 5 months. We don't consider 5 months to be a reasonable amount of time.
No, she should have handed that information over within 5 days.
Is it clear? Do we know that she did
period.
not give the information to the vendor?
Well, that's why it's taking so long. Clearly.
I'm sorry. Do you have knowledge? Have you spoken with Ajax? Do you have knowledge of this?
Here's what
But they
goes on.
have a vulnerability disclosure process, right? So they care about this stuff.
They have a security app, which is great. Like,
yeah,
they
which
have-
is incredible for a company
However,
like this size.
that their vulnerability handling process is step 1, attorneys. Step 2, PR. There is no step 3. Step 0 should be engineering, right? Like, I mean,
Well,
if
they have
Jan
to get
was
attorneys
able to
involved
talk to
because she's
an
gonna present
engineering
at DEF
department,
CON.
then this issue would have been resolved in 2 weeks.
Again,
So you mentioned.
But because of the friction introduced by lawyers and PR people,
Oh, watch! Oh, so
media-
this brings up
media,
another
yeah.
example that we have a challenge with researchers is the paranoia, right? Everybody's out to get them. They're scared to share anything, and this is a prime example. She found what she thinks is a
Todd, are
vulnerability,
you paranoid?
and
not
she's paranoid
Do
to
you
share the
think
data,
Colin's out
which is
to get
why
you?
it's taking
I
so
think it
long.
might be. And I think the evidence supports it.
Here, Todd, have another jolt and go back to your mom's.
Thanks. Jerk.
Oh, it's not. I thought that was a nice. But that was
I was
not
trying to
nice.
be friendly here,
Was
you
that
know.
a gesture? Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, there are 2 points I'd like to make very quickly. I mean, one is the law is a very blunt instrument to deal with some of this, particularly a criminal provision. In asking a court to get involved in a civil matter, you're asking them to play referee in a spat. in asking the government to get involved in a criminal manner, you're also asking to sanction someone for whatever they did. And so that's one thing. It's kind of a blunt instrument to deal with something that may be a disagreement. The second, though, is we do not bring a lot of cases. This is more likely to be a DMCA issue rather than a CFAA issue, but the numbers are roughly the same. For the CFAA, we bring, let's see, it is less than 0.1% of federal cases a year are brought under the CFAA. So there are very few criminal cases brought under the CFAA. What that means is we triage, we look for the most sort of significant harmful instances of crime before we bring the case. And so unless your case looks like that, there's a decent chance it's not going to end up certainly in a criminal proceeding. The difference, though, is it may still be civilly brought. That is, a company does have the ability to bring a civil action.
And that's the risk that researchers, independent researchers, take upon themselves, right? Is the risk of litigation over doing what is inarguably the right thing, right? See something, say something. And when they do see something and then say something, they are inviting litigation. Maybe not so much criminally, but certainly civilly.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not seeing something, they're hacking into something or trying to. If you see a car and you break the window and get in.
No one's implanting
I mean,
bugs.
you can't just say, I
reporting
found
it.
a bug in your windshield. I mean, but another point too, I mean, Leonard, what about the digital millennium, no, is it digital millennial, right? Millennials, Copyright Act, where they've got research exceptions in there, and clearly Jan has violated every single one of those research exceptions because she's not partnering and she's not doing this in good faith, so therefore.
It's absolutely good faith. She's given them 5 months.
So
She hasn't given the right information to them.
That's a good question. Does this sound as if it's a violation of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act?
Absolutely.
So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act makes it unlawful to circumvent a technical measure that is intended to protect a copyrighted material. Now, there are exceptions to a prosecution under the DMCA that are built into the statute, and there are some additional ones that resulted from this triennial DMCA process that occurred last year, which means that there actually are expanded exceptions for researchers under the DMCA. Now, there are certain factors to those exceptions. I don't have enough information here to say whether it falls under those exceptions. But again, as I mentioned, we bring precious few criminal DMCA cases. That doesn't mean still DMCA, like the CFA, has a civil cause of action. So a company could still decide to bring a DMCA case against Jan.
Oh, sorry, I just sold my Ajax talk real fast.
So, I believe that we have a
trust them,
question
but-
or a comment from our live studio audience.
So if you were to take this scenario and flip it and say Jan is actually an employee at Ajax in their application development environment and also a part of their security team, right? So she found out everything about this is the same. 5 months ago, she found a bug in the code and someone internally said it's not a big deal, we'll push it out anyways. She decides to go to Black Hat and present on it
You're
and then gets
fired.
fired. How does that change this? Is it a similar scenario? Whistleblower, right? You mentioned the whole security researchers take on a bit of risk by even doing this to begin with, regardless of the intentions. Does that change if she had worked for Ajax versus it being external?
You are fired and you're going to go to jail.
And
You violated your non-compete.
Good luck with your whistleblower
you're
lawsuit.
done. Yep,
Is she going to jail?
absolutely.
As I said,
Do not pass go.
so in that context, I mean, our experience is there's a decent chance we're less likely to hear about that matter because there would be some employment action that the employer may take. Now, they may still report them, as a potential violation of some crime, of some statute, maybe the DMCA. But my first answer still holds. We'd look at it to see about the legitimacy of the prosecution, the federal substantial interest in bringing the case, and some cry out for it. This one feels less like that.
As a follow-up, what statute are you talking about for the CFFA
Oh, I'm sorry, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, that's 18 U.S.C. 1030.
And that's a criminal statute,
It
right?
is a criminal statute, it is.
In your
There's a civil
scenario,
component to it, though.
wouldn't
Yeah.
Jan have the right to publish the information that her research has developed?
So this is unlikely to be a CFAA violation. Under the CFAA, that requires you to access a protected computer without authorization. In this instance, and I'm assuming, making some assumptions, but this is a phone that Jan has acquired and is now essentially in possession of and has some authority to interact with. The issue is whether she has the right to circumvent
She does
the
not.
technological measure, which is a DMCA issue.
No, she should not be doing what she's doing. She should pay the price.
We're listening to the audience now.
Sorry.
So
Researchers.
the bug exists, correct?
Hey, fake news,
Yes.
man. Fake news. Hey, yes. Right? There's no evidence
take
this
it-
bug exists.
Yeah.
So the action is more against the researcher releasing the bug rather than addressing the bug itself.
Hey, nobody said there's an actual bug.
I mean, I believe that Jan intends to prove it at Black Hat.
It says disputes importance of bug, which logically makes it seem like there is a bug.
Well, exactly, because as we always talk about.
But
and-
this doesn't lead to my question, though. I do have a question about that.
Okay.
My question is that if you have someone who's bringing the bug and the action of the vendor is more against protecting their assets more than protecting their customers, regardless of the importance of the bug, if the bug isn't that important, then you would think that it would probably be an easy enough fix. So my question is, what difference is it for the researcher who's trying to do this in a legal way versus someone who may be trying to approach it illegally, as in taking advantage of that vulnerability to exploit customers?
Well, I mean, in this scenario, this is not a big deal. There's non-big deal issues everywhere, and they don't all get fixed. Look, I know a little bit about this security stuff, and I've heard about things called information disclosure vulnerabilities, which are usually very, very, what was that thing, CVSD? It's like
CVSS.
1.0 or something. You're not going to fix all them. I mean, clearly this is like that. So if you're going to fix every little tiny minutia that you see, companies are going to lose tons of money. So you got to prioritize, and here you
Ajax
can.
should
And
have
Jan's
no
going to
problem
blow
with
it out of
representing at
promotion.
Black Hat. If it's that lame, then
No,
should
because
have
she's
no
going to
problem.
lie about what she found.
So Todd, does it
and then the
follow-
fake media is going to create this
Fake media,
storm,
all right.
and there's going to be this crazy news cycle, and then we're going to be that company is going to be under fire. So, what's that?
You mean like Bloomberg?
Yeah, I guess Bloomberg could do that. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there that are
So-
over sensationalize everything.
Hey, would
So
you guys
Todd-
expect corporate lawsuits if Jan worked for, say, Globalplex, the major competitor of Ajax?
Oh, now you're stepping into a different ballpark of IP theft, which we're going to sue that company for everything they got. Because they did it because Jan then did it on behalf of that company. They
So-
directed her to do it.
I'd just like to go back to the prior comment. So Todd, does it follow, the point here that if the bug is a minor bug, that it's actually a quick fix? Like, is that normally the case?
Oh boy. Severity of the bug rarely has much to do with fixing, but also like you can fix anything in 3 months. Like I don't care, 0 to 10, it doesn't matter. It is if you put your mind to it, you could fix anything in 3 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah.
Could I go back to one point? The last caller had a question about whether Jan goes to work for a competitor. And I do think it's an interesting point. That is, let's say Jan was an employee of Ajax and then went to another employer. There would be a whole nother set of concerns, which would be about theft of trade secrets, right? We'd have to figure out whether this was actually a trade secret. But, that only underscores the fact that different facts can suddenly shift the legal analysis, and even on the criminal side.
And unusually, we have a question from our cameraman. Obviously, very interested in the topic.
Long time supporter of the show. Love you guys.
Thank you.
We love your work.
So listening to the last few callers, it seems like it'd be much easier for Jen if she just anonymously publicized the bug
Absolutely.
and just walked away from it.
100% easier.
So why not?
All for it.
Because she's a researcher and she wants the credit for it, so she gets the fame.
Is that a common thing that researchers are very interested in giving their
Some
name out there?
researchers are motivated by prestige. by that fame, but many aren't. Many, like I said before, like many are interested only in the intellectual challenge, in making people safe, in possibly in getting paid, like the prior Byte Lord, Mr. Lord. But Jen's clearly not of that persuasion. I mean, it
Have you
depends
seen
on
where
what she's
she
into,
lived?
right? So like,
She lives in like a 7,000 square foot mansion.
How do you know?
whoa,
Twitter.
nice docs.
I Googled
Yeah.
her. I do my research. I do my research.
Yeah, so some researchers are the kind that will come on news discussion programs, and,
Sure.
and others on. So perhaps we should invite her onto a show in the future. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, can I participate too? Please.
We'll be talking to the producers about that.
So I'm just curious, I haven't heard the phrase responsible disclosure at all.
I did wonder.
I debated for a really long time whether if I gave them an umbrella first, would that be
Am I
not
about to
getting
get
caught
hosed
in the rain?
down?
Like, if you're not the umbrella, are you not caught in the rain? And I decided rather than giving you a shit rainbow rain, I just
My unreasonable speaker request was the lyrics from whatever that stupid Pina Colada song was. Thank you very much. Does someone want some champagne?
thank you all for coming and talking. I went to the good bar for that, not the like.
This is great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So for this scenario, no one used the phrase responsible disclosure, and I was curious if the Department of Justice has some guidelines on responsible disclosure and how a researcher should behave.
So we have not attempted to get mired in what is, I understand, a decades-long discussion and argument about, coordinated disclosure, responsible disclosure, full disclosure. We are interested in making sure that, again, this is done in a way that doesn't violate the law. And the laws that we tend to look at rise and fall on issues of things like authority and consent, which is why we like things like VDPs and bug bounty programs, because they iron that out. Now, the question of whether someone coordinates first before discloses, I can tell you on a policy level, that's preferable, right? We want to make sure that systems are safe and information is not put at risk, ideally.
It's polite.
But there's but there's a difference between what would be good policy and something that we have a statute that criminalizes. And on its face, we don't have a statute that makes responsible disclosure, coordinated disclosure, full disclosure, any sort of ruling on that per se. It's about the other facts surrounding how you do it, what your claim is when you do it. Again, whether you make a threat of some sort as you do it.
I mean, at the end of the day, she could have approached this totally differently. I hear that Ajax hires people of this type of skill. Rather than threaten them and expose them at a conference per se, she should have applied there and tried to work.
So-
I mean, they hire people that have her skills, and
So researchers do have value to add.
Yeah, I mean, they would hire her and they'd have her do, let me see, they'd probably have her do pen testing, they'd probably have her do policy writing, they'd probably have her secure the infrastructure, they'd probably have her look at the
that's
logging
not
on the
hacking.
cloud environment. They'd probably have her talk to like their internal, do training for people inside the company. and they pay amazing for money. Like they probably pay her about, $100,000 to do all of that for the entire company. Maybe, 25% of that's probably bonus.
I mean, the fact remains is that she found a bug. She saw something. She said something, and nothing's happened.
But it's her own fault that bad stuff's going to happen.
And I'd just like a show of the hands from our fantastic live studio audience. Does 5 months seem a reasonable amount of time for you? Yes.
Super long. Reasonable? No way, dude. Super long.
Unreasonable?
Unreasonably long.
Okay.
Oh, no. I mean, you could triple that and we'd be good. Maybe quadruple it.
So, so where do we think that this is going to go? Do we think that Ajax, now that there's been, major national news coverage,
Right.
that Ajax will in fact patch this issue?
I expect a patch in the next 20 hours.
That
From
fast?
airing. Oh, yeah.
But because they've been working on one for 5 months.
I'm sure that they will start work now, and they will have,
I expect to hear a statement from Ajax saying that they take security seriously, that this is
I also
not
expect
an
that
issue
statement.
whatsoever. This is somebody with,
I think we've already seen
fake
that statement
story.
from
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's a truthful statement.
Okay, because you have some sort of insider information on it.
Oh, no. I just like the products.
Yeah. Isn't that their new phone that's not out yet? So our next story. Our next story is around a researcher who has
Whoa.
300,000 records. Does this
Nice.
does this seem like a lot?
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's tons. that's a third of a million.
Okay, if those are health records, that researcher criminal is going to pay a hefty fine from the government for breaching all those health records.
Well,
Absolutely.
So let's perhaps find out a little bit
didn't
more.
write the vol.
Let's perhaps find a little
that's
bit more
illegal.
about the
That is
story.
clearly
Let's see if
illegal.
it is health records.
Man.
Oh, one of my favorites, the Church of Online Trolls.
Oh my gosh, and they're going after a nonprofit? What is
Yeah.
wrong with this
No,
person?
we've had them on the show before.
What?
Yeah, they're always entertaining.
Wow, I mean, they've stooped to new levels here to target nonprofits doing good, charitable
the Church
work.
of Online Trolls. No one likes them.
Does it change the dynamic if it's a non-profit?
Oh, absolutely. They don't have any money, and they're doing good. They're helping.
They're doing good?
Yeah.
Well, are they?
Are they? No, you're finally
Are they?
cracking. Excellent. Yeah. What good are they doing?
Are you worried that your information is in this dump, Colin?
Yeah.
I haven't got a phone call yet, so,
So let's
I'm
just
probably
unpick
okay.
the story a little
Look,
bit.
they break the politically correct barrier. They make sure proper information is disseminated. They don't want to. They beat through all the BS. So yeah, they're doing good. They're spreading good news, good information.
So just to unpick the story a little bit, it sounds like they have information from all their donors, 300,000 of them, and that's what the researchers
poor
access,
innocent
right?
people.
So does this include, do we believe that this includes financial information? It looks like the story sort of suggests that it does.
From what I can tell, it's like first name, last name, address, credit card. Kind of, it's the thing. It is the identity kit, and good. I mean, good for them. Like if first off, regardless of how I feel about the Church of Online Trolls, this researcher is doing a public service by releasing this information, by proving the vulnerability, to let the Church of Online Trolls donor list know what kind of risks they take when they contribute to this particular nonprofit.
Well, this is clearly criminal behavior, and I guarantee that the Department of Justice is going to agree with me. I mean,
So let us-
they broke into a database, they stole the
Hang on.
information,
For the
and they
last
didn't even
two,
communicate with
your
this
problem
company.
was the researcher hasn't proved anything, and then in this one, the researcher proved something, and now you have a problem with that.
Yes.
Okay, just
All right, so
to be
Leonard,
clear.
perhaps you could tell us what the DOJ's position on this is.
Well, not surprisingly, I have to tell you that we would have to be agnostic on the nature of the organization. They're a victim of the crime. So we would look at that first and foremost. It's not a criminal
The
organization.
Church of Online Trolls, though, has had some interesting things to say about the Attorney General and the department. No?
And they would have to take a number. So it's something we would not care about if they were the victim of an offense, of an intrusion. The question we would have, I think, at the threshold would be why they have 300,000 records belonging to this organization. That is kind of facially evidence.
Again, the researcher didn't write the vulnerability.
They committed a crime by stealing data.
But it was the Church of Online Trolls that made it available through their negligence.
Of a violation of crime, of an offense, of a statute. That is, if they access the Church of Online Trolls server and obtain information without authorization from
I'm
the church,
sure they just used the API as it was written.
then they would violate the law.
And I'm sure there was a clear disclaimer that says unauthorized access is prohibited. So this is
I hereby
this is like, I mean,
authorize.
this is of all our
Okay.
scenarios, this is cut and dry crime. Like, come on, this is.
Perhaps we can
don't
find
even
out
need to talk about
a
it.
little bit more about
That's a
this.
crime.
Like, let's take a look at. Okay, so here's an example of some of the very highbrow work of the Church of Online Trolls.
Good job sticking up for yourself.
Yeah,
I love
okay.
that. I love that emoji.
Is that something that your corporate comms team uses a lot? No?
Occasionally.
Approved? Yeah. Okay.
It's definitely.
So you seemed very certain, Todd, that that there was no sort of hard technical hacking going on here. Do you
No,
have
it was probably
familiarity
pretty-
with our researcher? Are they part of your organization?
They're not part of my organization. I mean, they've been around, right? Like, I know people who know people.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, like the fact, once again, like this is hacker blaming, right? Like this researcher saw something, said something. I mean, sure, maybe 300,000 records exposed is a lot, but like it's not like he exposed them. They exposed them through the API. And who knows if he's the first or the last person to notice this vulnerability.
Any of your colleagues, would you condone them doing something like this?
I mean, if it
Downloading
gets the
a
message
database.
out and if it fixes the bug.
So you're not a security researcher, and you're a black hat. You're evil. Absolutely. I mean, in our previous examples, you argued about how the researcher was acting in good faith and collaborating and sharing the information,
Absolutely.
and that's what
Yep.
they should do. And in this one, they didn't even try. They didn't try.
I don't know what brought them to this point of dumping these records. I have to imagine
They're
though,
bad
that
people.
it is they came to an impasse.
So in instances where we've asked the question, why do you have a tranche of records? One answer sometimes someone will provide is, we needed a proof of concept.
On the nose.
There is no exception in the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act for downloading information to provide a proof of concept.
Write your congressman.
Now, I will say, though, that one of our factors we consider when we bring a CFAA prosecution is the degree of harm, the degree of damage. And, for example, if a researcher finds a vulnerability and doesn't take the entire database, finds a way, screenshots something that demonstrates the damage without also violating the privacy of a bunch of customers, a bunch of third parties, it's a better case for the researcher. We still think there probably is a better way than perhaps breaking into the network and obtaining the information, but there are ways of at least minimizing the harm such that we may have some countervailing considerations when we consider
So
whether
let's
to bring a
perhaps
case.
take a look at what the researcher did and see if that meets the standard you're talking about. So how would the department view a thing like this? Obviously, you can't comment on open cases, but
Yeah, he's sort of hosed. So if in fact...
Is that a legal term?
Yes.
that is, yeah.
They essentially took 300,000 records, are now publicizing them. There simply isn't really a case to be made under the statute that this conduct was not a violation of law. So, I mean, again, even if there was some other reason that we didn't bring this case criminally because of resources or something of that sort, they would certainly face civil liability, and there's a very real chance that they would end up in legal jeopardy.
Yeah,
Well,
they're gonna
legal
pay-
or
they're gonna
not,
pay-
like
they're gonna
I
pay
can't
credit monitoring
imagine
for
that we would be
300,000
talking about
people.
this unless this attack, what was his name, Sadiq, dropped all these records. So
Yeah, I'm with the DOJ.
I am happy to learn that future possible contributors can steer clear of these bad actors.
And so perhaps a show of hands for our studio audience. Who thinks that dropping these records is an appropriate way of getting the word out? Interesting. Who's just terrified to put their hand up because the Department of Justice is in the room? Okay, so do we have any questions or comments from our studio audience?
Mr. Plug.
Hey, so you said, they should try and provide a screenshot or whatever if something like this comes up. But if they provide a screenshot, they're going to have to redact the stuff, then they've already seen it. Like, then there already has been a violation, surely. Like, that can't make any difference. And then what if the only way to view the records is to make one API call and then it dumps the entire database? I mean, what are they going to do?
Can we just
next?
ask the producer to add subtitles when we yeah.
You're gonna have to repeat the question.
That's a yes, apparently. So I guess two answers. You're right. There may still be a violation of law. If you're in a position where you are seeing something that you're going to screenshot as your proof of concept. The point is, as I mentioned, that when we look at the CFAA case, one of the considerations is the degree of damage that's done. If you are, and there's no right that a researcher has, going to violate the privacy of 300,000 people, in addition, while this information may be insecure on the server,
The researcher
as
didn't violate their privacy. It was the Church of
demonstrated by
Ontology
the
Trolls
server.
violated
Okay,
the privacy.
please, I understand this is a very passionate topic, but just one at a time.
It's unclear that we live in a better world now that this information exists both on an insecure server and with the researcher, right? And so there are ways of going about this that we think would minimize the likelihood of causing, kind of external unnecessary damage. As far as there being other techniques for doing this, I guess I would suggest that if there is no other way other than dumping 300,000 records, that perhaps that's not the course you need to go. You may need to risk that your company will not believe, based on your representations, that there's a problem, rather than putting yourself in greater jeopardy and putting other people's information in greater jeopardy by dumping that database.
Yeah, I mean, next time the researcher really should think about like those, that like 85-year-old grandmother whose information was taken and now she lost everything because somebody spoofed her identity and, took all her money. Researchers, they don't think about that. In this scenario, only thought about himself or herself.
Would it be a violation if they downloaded the records but sent it directly to the church? Or not as many records, but just downloaded a handful of them and sent them to the church as proof of saying that there's a vulnerability?
So, yes, it probably would still be a technical violation, but again, they took some steps to mitigate the damage. And that would be relevant to our prosecutorial decision. I'm not saying that that would be a safe harbor and suddenly you're out of any legal jeopardy, but it would be a relevant consideration. As I said in the beginning, our goal is to try to figure out whether you are someone who is engaged in malicious activity or someone who's actually looking to do some good. There's no simple way of doing that. So we have to look at indications of your behavior, how you, shielded the information you obtained. There are many factors we have to consider, but in that instance, they took some steps to at least mitigate the degree of damage. They helped themselves, they've reduced the risk, but they're still in jeopardy.
Does the DOJ have any additional responsibility for the implications of the data being hosted at a .edu domain?
So,
Good question.
It is a good question. I mean, I think in these instances, we would reach out and try to secure the information that's out in the wild, right? So we would have the ability to contact the educational institution and say, you've got material on your network, once we had verified that's what's happened. If the company came to us and said we suffered a breach and this is where our information is, in the course of that investigation, we would have to reach out and determine that information is there. Once we've done that, we would try to take steps to mitigate the harm. So we would try to get that information offline, off the net.
So that sounds, it does sound a little bit as if the way that this story might go is we might see some sort of legal action brought against this researcher.
Certainly, it is quite likely in this instance.
Unfortunate, but
Oh, yeah,
Nothing
absolutely.
to add?
Oh, no, I'm one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that probably brings us to the end of our show. It just remains for me to thank Leonard and the rest of our panel. And thank you, our live studio audience.